Welcome to Property Matters. I'm Stephen Galpin, and today I'm going to be talking about politics in property and the seemingly diminishing interest in decarbonisation and general green issues in the construction industry. I'm joined today by one of the UK's leading property industry entrepreneurs, with a group structure spanning construction, residential and commercial property, and interests in companies focusing on the green aspects of the industry. United Capital is recognised as one of Scotland's largest private landlords, boasting a portfolio valued at over £200 million, along with group interests in construction and decarbonisation. So I'm going to say welcome to Graeme, CEO of United Capital Group, who's joining me by Zoom from Spain. Graeme, welcome to Property TV and welcome to Property Matters.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to start off by saying I'm extremely jealous because I can see the sunshine streaming behind you, and here we are in a terribly dull autumn day in London. But there we are. That's life, okay? But no doubt a measure of your success. Graeme, the first thing I want to talk about is our mutual governments. That's Scotland and England, Westminster, with their intervention and their sort of effect on the property market by bringing in regulations that, in my view, are not always well thought through and can have really quite a detrimental effect on the property business, but not least making it very difficult for people like yourself to plan a business structure, to really move forward when these sorts of interventions change week by week, and we suffer from a constant stream of housing ministers who seem to take up tenure for a very short period of time, and again make planning very, very difficult for you. What's your view on this? Is it any worse in Scotland than it is here?
Yes, it is worse. It is worse.
Okay.
So think yourself lucky, really.
Right.
I say that tongue in cheek, but no. Look, I think the reality here is this has been going on for. This is not just a recent phenomenon. This has been going on for a number of years now. I think we were one of the early adopters of affordable housing in Scotland. So we cater to a demographic that was struggling when we first got into the buy-to-let and started building our portfolio. We were very much focused on a key demographic that actually were being excluded from obtaining rental properties. They maybe they couldn't pass credit checks. They maybe just didn't have enough money to pay at the top end. And we've seen an opportunity there in that. So as we grew our business and we were very much looking at local housing allowance as the rental income. I remember when David Cameron got in, and one of the first thing Mr. Osborne done straight away was change the calculation and reduced overnight with the stroke of a pen the calculation on it, which reduced it from being the 50th percentile of the high end and the low end. So there was a medium. They reduced it to the 30th percentile. So they were very clear in those days, way back then, that the property market, the buy-to-let market was going to be a target. It was going to be a target for income. It was going to be a target for votes. And really that has just continued in various shapes and forms over the years. And I've spoken, in most recent years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where what was the legislation, regulation, and taxation that was brought in was really brought in to drive out the smaller amateur, if you like, landlord or investor, and to try and bring in more professional, bigger, more sort of, if you like, well-capitalized businesses under the PRS scheme. So it was very clear where they've been going. Doesn't help, as you quite rightly say. There's been 14 housing ministers in 14 years in England. I think during that time there's only been 2 or 3, ironically, in Scotland. But nevertheless, the focus and what they've got, what they bring in, and how they've attacked, if you like, and it feels like an attack on the private landlord over these years has been the same. It's unsettling when different views with different ministers coming in, but certainly in Scotland, there's been one theme all the way through it, and it has been very much it feels like attack on the landlord.
Well, I think you're right, and I mean certainly in England. Over this last 2 or 3 years, in fact, we've had quite an attack with various tax changes which make it more difficult for a private individual to run a buy-to-let business, if you like. The encouragement is to force them into having limited companies, which I'm guessing the cynical view there is that it's probably a lot easier to chase taxation from a limited company than it is from an individual. But also they're trying to sort of encourage the larger corporate landlord rather than the smaller buy-to-let person. Now, the only danger is with that, I think we're losing sight of what sort of Margaret Thatcher did in the late 80s by bringing in assured short-hold tenancies, which means that landlords could get their properties back whenever they reasonably wanted. And it brought a lot of housing into the housing market and solved an awful lot of problems for the government. And we seem to be losing sight of that. And I mean, I have to say, when George and David came on the telly and said, we're going to build 250,000 houses this year, I often wondered, who's we? Is it those two with the, fluorescent jackets on, or quite, what were they aiming at? I don't know. It's very difficult to tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, and certainly what's happened here when you go through, I mean, I said, let's say a few years ago, the business that we were in, we found ourselves in as a mid-sized, reasonable-sized landlord in the UK. The intention was very much to squeeze the accidental landlords out and to try and rationalise and professionalise the sector. And I firmly believe that was a good thing at the time, to raise standards in the sector, to professionalise it and regulate it, tighter, which wasn't a bad thing in terms of the rules. But what they've done was, it's gone way too far now, and the sense that we decided that we were exiting the property business 3-4 years ago, because we either needed to get really big, and really it was get big or get out at that time, and we'd looked at it and we've seen how this was going to play out over the coming years. And I have to say, I'm glad we took that decision, because every one of our fears, if you like, is actually came to fruition. And just in simple, you look at what's happened in Scotland in the last few weeks, with rent caps, there's a 6-month amnesty on evictions. You cannot, nearly in every circumstances, you cannot evict a tenant. And that's been put in, that's now in law for 6 months until March next year, with an option to continue for a further 6 months, then a further 6 months. I mean, that's 18 months. Then, only then at the end of it can you start any action to potentially evict a tenant that may or may not have paid their rent or trashed the property or caused all sorts of trouble. So, it's this, as much as that's that's recently came into law, this has been how this has been, coming. It's been coming down the path, if you like, for a number of years now. And so I'm not, disappointed that it's came in, and because it all has an effect, but not surprised, because they made it clear that this was the intention. But I think what they've done is, now when they are playing politics with it and they're playing for votes, what seems to happen now is, and we're really seeing this ourselves now at the moment, and most of our properties are in university cities, and there is a dearth of accommodation because a number of landlords have sold up because it's not worth it for them. They don't want the hassle of it. So there's a real shortage of quality housing for students, particularly coming from abroad, to the extent that we've seen Glasgow, for example, have to refuse students to come, or tell students, look, you can't come this year because we don't have enough accommodation for you. It's real. So we are really on the heat, on the ground now, rather, seeing the effects of these policies that have been coming bit by bit by bit. They're reeling through now. There is a massive shortage of rental accommodation,
which is inevitably going to put prices up, isn't it?
Yeah.
And make it more and more difficult for the younger people. I mean, one thing that gave me a little bit of encouragement, you mentioned earlier that the government was fairly clear about setting levels of what they term affordable housing. I'm not sure down here anybody really understands what affordable housing is. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to assess. And certainly a lot of the housing on the market is certainly not affordable, whether it be rental or purchase. I think that's the difficulty.
Yeah. Well, it's very difficult to make it affordable. House prices, skyrocketing that they have done the last few years. Now they're changing the mortgage rates and interest and just general costs of running and maintaining the properties to the standards that are required, and the upgrades required for EPC levels, for example. Yeah. You've got to be thinking ahead in terms of if I'm replacing this boiler, is it going to be a hydrogen boiler? Am I going for an air source heat pump or these are additional costs for any landlord now that they need to factor in. It's not easy,
Okay, Graeme, just to finish off this half of the show, do you think there's any room for a look at more practical and more appropriate mortgage products? I mean, I'm thinking in terms of perhaps lifetime mortgages that can be passed down through generations, which may ease the repayment strain and may allow you to reduce the deposit strain for some people. What do you think? Do we need to have a look at this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think any sort of innovative, sort of financing product that could ease the current pain in particular would certainly be helpful and interesting. Does that solve the attitude of the government in that? Who's going to get the benefit of that would be my question. Is it me that's going to get the benefit of that, or is that benefit going to get taken in another form by the government through new regulation and legislation? So provided the owner or got the benefit of it, I think it's certainly something that we should be looking at.
I mean, talking of benefit, I mean, we've recently, whether it sticks or not, I don't know, but we've recently had this reduction in stamp duty. And of course, a lot of people are saying, well, actually, that's all very well. It's not really going to help the first time buyers because they still can't afford the deposit. But of course, it will help buy-to-let purchasers who will be making a profit due to it. So anyway, there we are. Well, look, Graeme, we're going to go to a break now. So join me again after the break when I'll be talking to Graeme some more about the way the industry is heading. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Matters. I'm talking to Graeme Carlin, CEO of United Capital. Welcome back, Graeme. Graeme, I want to move on to now a subject that is probably dear to your heart and certainly of interest to many of your companies, which are the green issues, which we've all been encouraged to take up in the industry. I've had sort of marginal experience of this on some of the developments I've advised on and consulted on. But my feeling is that I'm not sure if it's not a case of really the blind leading the blind. I mean, at one stage we were encouraged down here in Canary Wharf to put in biomass boilers. Everybody forgot then that the biomass fuel is highly flammable and would probably make your apartment block uninsurable. And so the biomass boilers got parked and conventional boilers were brought back, and developers just wasted millions of pounds on the guidance of the local authority. And I think we may be getting into that ground. For instance, if I take the first subject, which is the insistence that EV chargers, electric vehicle chargers, be put into all new build homes. Are EV cars the way we're going, or are they going to be hydrogen cars in the future? Is this just yet another added expense to put the cost of housing up? What do you think?
I think you make a valid point there, and I like it. Blind leading the blind, because it certainly does feel like that. I mean, we're very active in the sector, and there is no expert, and no one has the answer. It's almost like we're finding our way as we go, and that's okay, because I think we do need to make progress. Because there's always going to be. It appears that there's always the next best thing or the next right thing coming out. So whether we started with solar, biomass, and then it was air source heat pumps, hydrogen, ground source heat pumps. All of these things that are in there, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm not an engineer in any way, shape, or form, but it depends who I talk to. Every one of them's got their favorite, and can explain thoroughly, clearly, the benefits of it. But it's not one size fits all. It would appear certain things for certain buildings and certain properties, and different for others. So, there you go with the biomass. That will be suitable for a farm in the middle of Scotland, for example, but for a big building in the centre of Canary Wharf, not so much. So, yeah, what we are seeing is, I think, in my opinion on it, we need to keep progressing on what we know now, but just being aware that the likelihood is that something better, cleaner, cheaper, smaller is likely to evolve over time. And we just need to deal with that as it comes. So you can only play with the cards you're dealt at the moment. I think the EV charger one is an interesting one, because whilst that absolutely in principle sounds like the right thing to do, and given that the push on to EVs, but you're absolutely correct. And what happens in hydrogen? How does that? Where do we store it? I mean, is there enough space for the storage batteries? Because we can't link to the grid in most cases, or depending on where it's getting built. So it's a bit more tricky than that. And again, is it going to be that it's just one of these things where we go and build all these properties at huge expense, and it's like, it's going to be like you fit one of these coffee machines or something in your house that you never use, but you've had to pay for it, and it just sits there for 10, 15 years,
Tell me about it. Yeah. No, I mean, it's obviously everybody, I think, these days is concerned. But I mean, I go back to an article I read the other day. The government were encouraging you to go online to look at what you could do to save energy costs, just in a practical way throughout your house. And actually, the only scheme that they could suggest, the only suggestions they could make, were to fit one of these ground heat exchangers. Now, what it went on to say is that this will probably cost you, by the time you've done your installation and everything else, probably £30,000 as an average sort of cost. But there was a big but. They said that not every household would be suitable. You've got to have fairly level flooring. You've got to do this, that, and the other. So unless you actually then fitted underfloor heating and made modifications to your house as well as to the outside area where these pumps are fitted, you were probably going to be looking at the sort of, thick end of £100,000 by the time you finished. And of course, then you have to get into this business of saying, well, if I spend, 50 or £100,000, how long is it going to take me to get back in terms of energy savings? And the answer probably is you never will, not in your lifetime. Yeah. And secondly, it's the suitability, because some of these heat exchangers take an immense amount of energy to run, do they not?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, you tell me.
They do, and it's when you're trying to retrofit these into older buildings, whether it's a ground source heat pump or an air source heat pump, it isn't quite as simple as people make out, and the damage that it does to the internal of the property, and where they're having to, do relay piping and do all that stuff. I know this firsthand because my sister actually had a load of work done earlier this year, and it wasn't just the cost of the heat pump and the new radiators, all that stuff. It was, she had her whole flooring replaced, everything had to get ripped up, and internal damage done to the property and redecoration as well. It cost a small fortune for something. So, and that bit doesn't get. Nobody really looks at that part of it. They just look, it's 30 grand for a heat pump installation, but believe me, it's a lot more expensive than that.
Well, I hope one of your companies at least gave a mate's rates on the supply supply of the pump. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, these things are not simple conversions, are they? I mean, just before our program today, just so that I don't sound totally dense talking on these subjects, I just looked up at one of the big companies down here that were offering a sort of boiler exchange system. And good heavens, there's half a dozen different options, and where you go to choose, I mean, it's beyond me. But of course, it is going to be the future, and we are going to have to look at these measures to try and save energy. There's no question of that. But on that subject, I know in Scotland you successfully produce a lot of energy with the wind farms, both onshore and offshore. What are we doing about solar heating these days?
I think solar, it seems to be making a bit of a comeback. Certainly in Scotland it is. In actual fact, I think what we're seeing, I wouldn't say there's a relaxation of planning laws, but we are seeing more approvals of planning applications for solar farms, and you're seeing more and more. It's a gimme. You have to have solar panels on a lot of new build roofing now. So all new builds have to have it included in the build. We're seeing more and more businesses now, warehouse offices, going that route, as well as some. Like in our building, we have one of our buildings. We have a windmill that powers electric vehicle charging points and so on. And the plan is that we're south facing one of our buildings, so it can generate its own. So the site will become fully self-sustained. Two of our sites actually will be that. So there's definitely benefits, on a commercial level. I think in a residential domestic level. New build housing has it, so we're seeing it almost like making a comeback, because it was the thing to do, kind of disappeared for a while. But I think the reality is everything's needed. Wind, solar, water, wave power, all of it, hydrogen, all of it's needed. So no one thing's going to solve this problem.
I was just going to say there's no silver bullet, is there really?
No.
That's the issue. Okay, Graeme, just to finish off, I wonder if you would perhaps give us your thoughts on perhaps a couple of items that you see are going to be the critical changes in our housing market over the next immediate few years. Given the financial turmoil that we're in, given the political turmoil that we're suffering at the moment, what do you think? What does the future hold for us?
Well, I think what we need is stability. I mean, 4 chancellors in 4 months. You couldn't write the script how any political party can implode the way in which the Conservatives have imploded over the last sort of 4 or 5 months. It's incredible. And that is, any party to get themselves in this position from the position of real strength that they were in. I find it incredible, really. So what it's done is it's created more uncertainty, nervousness. Clearly, the issues it's had in the financial market, and particularly the value of the pound versus other currencies, which is, what we need now is we need some stability now going forward, and we can make decisions then from a stable point of view, rather than these crazy knee-jerk reactions and 24 hours later complete U-turns. It's so unsettling for businesses. It's so unsettling for any investors coming in from outside, looking at which is actually what we're supposed to be doing, attracting investment, attracting new monies and new opportunities to come into the country. And we've created a stir, in my view, unnecessarily, That needs to settle down as quickly as possible, so as we can then get on with a real job, which is to provide good, affordable, sustainable housing and buildings for the UK market.
Okay. Well, Graeme, thank you very much for your time today. And I'm sure our viewers too have been intrigued and fascinated by your views. You've obviously been very successful with your businesses, Graeme, and I wish you continuing good luck with that. So thank you again for coming on our show. That's all we've got time for today. So I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Matters.